Hey everyone, this is Kia of Kia's Corner, and Kia's Corner presents Author Spotlight. And tonight, I have a treat for all of you historical fiction lovers. Tonight, if you've been following me, this is Historical Fiction Weekend, and we are capping off Historical Fiction Weekend with none other than the illustrious Piper Huguley. What an incredible way to end historical fiction weekend. So we're going to talk to this amazing author about some of the books that have been highly celebrated and greatly reviewed, actually. So we have the Home to Milford College series, which I am interested in digging in tonight about because it's my favorite book series. One of my favorite historical fiction book series of all time. We're also going to ask her about some of her other works. We're going to ask her about hi everybody, come on in. Hi everybody. We're going to ask her about American Daughters. We're going to ask her about the book By Her Own Design. I can't wait to bring her on so that I can have this conversation with her, because there's so much that we can glean from her, being the type of writer that she is and having the background that she has, particularly with her being a professor of literature at Clark Atlanta University. I cannot wait to dive in and talk to her about what it's like to have that as your profession, to teach young minds about literature and then also write literature, right? That's amazing. And so I cannot wait to bring her on. I'm just waiting for her. I can't wait to introduce her to all of you who are watching me. If you are a book lover like myself, and if historical fiction is one of your favorite genres, as it is mine, picking the mind of the writer that she is to find out how she's able to weave these captivating and just heartwarming stories. A lot of them, I don't say a lot, but if you have read the Home to Milford College series, you know that it's more than just historical fiction. It's also a love story. There is a love story that that you're going to read throughout the entire series. Love is at the core. Love is at the core of every decision that is made by the main characters while they are surrounded by the time period. So I can't wait to get into this, and we're going to welcome her in right now. All right, let's do it. Let's see. All right, I'm getting you in. I'm trying to get you in right now. Okay, Piper, if you can just request to join my live, I'll be able to pull you in. Let's see. Someone joins, and we can see. I'm trying to bring you in. I'm trying to bring you in. Request to join. Hi, Piper. If you can request to join, I will accept your request and I can pull you on. There we go. Okay. Here we are. Here we are. Go live. There
Can
we
you
are. We
hear
got
me?
it.
Good.
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, good. I completely forgot. Every time you do Instagram Live, you have to do it on your phone. You can't do it on your computer.
Oh,
So,
okay. Okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry
But I
about
made it.
that.
I made it. No, it's
You're
okay.
here.
It's cool. I'll just prop it up, and here I am. So,
You're here. We're here. Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight to Author
well,
Spotlight.
thank
I
you
am so
for
blessed.
having me. I'm so
Yes,
honored, and especially why you want to have me. I mean, it's been
it's
more
been a
than a
while.
while
It's been a
since
while.
people wanted to talk about this, so it's cool.
Yeah, yeah. listen, historical fiction is my absolute favorite genre
I'm
to
glad.
read. And when I read the Home to Milford College series, when I read the first book, from that point on, that's what really got me to go deeper into historical fiction when I read your
Oh, that's
books.
wonderful. Okay.
Absolutely. And from there, it just became this thing. I became a mood reader after that. And
Okay.
I would go through these moods where all I would read was historical fiction, and then I would move to a different genre. So yes, and I have to thank you for that, because you helped me to get deep into that genre and explore other material, other authors as well.
Well,
So
that
thank you for that.
I really appreciate that. And it's Kia,
Yes.
right? Yeah,
Yes.
I
Yes.
really appreciate that. That's why I did it. It is for
Yeah.
younger people like yourself to
Right.
know something about the history and
Hmm.
what the ancestors had gone through, to try to
Yes.
make it, um, something that you could touch and feel more,
Yes.
in
Yes.
terms of their trials and tribulations. So I'm glad. I'm glad
Yes.
that it got through to someone.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great point that you brought up, is about making sure that we could feel that, we are, sometimes it feels so impersonal when you're
Yeah,
reading history and when
yeah,
it's taught to us the way that it is, especially about slavery or
yes,
Reconstruction.
yep,
It's like you hear a bunch of facts, but we don't have those personal stories, those human stories, for us to feel connected
yep,
to our people.
yeah.
And for me, I had older grandparents. My grandfather was born in 1919.
Okay.
So I got a lot of stories from him and
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother. But one thing that remained consistent was that there were certain parts of history that they just didn't want to talk about.
That,
That
that,
part.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that left a longing for
Mm-hmm.
material, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew, just as a person in the world growing up, I knew that there had to be more to the story
Right,
than just the
right.
facts that we received. And so from there, just with myself personally, in undergrad, I took, Black history
Mm-hmm.
courses and read
Mm-hmm.
some
Mm-hmm.
slave narratives and things of that
Yep,
nature,
yep, yep.
but there was still a hunger for more information. And so that's the part that your books play, especially when I'm talking about the Home to Milford College series, is
Mm-hmm.
that you gave such a layered human story and experience. Like, these are people with feelings, these are people
Mm-hmm.
with
Yeah.
families, these are people who had hopes and dreams. And it touches your heart when you're able to connect to these characters, knowing that there are people who really live lives like this. So I guess my first question to you, because I know that you're a professor
Mm-hmm.
with Clark
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta University,
That's right.
was that the main thing for you as far as your decision, when you could have written anything,
Mm-hmm.
to write these types of stories specifically? Was that your aim, is to educate the reader?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And it started out, I'm thinking about like 2010-ish.
Okay.
And I noticed, and at that point, I was at Spelman before I
Okay.
moved down the road to Clark.
Okay.
And I noticed increasingly students not knowing as much about the history. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
literature professor in terms of 19th and 20th century United States literature, and
Okay.
I would have to give quick history lessons
Mm-hmm.
before
Okay.
I could teach the literature, before we could talk about any of the literature that I was
Wow.
teaching.
Okay.
And so my thought was, and then of course, my poor students, they don't realize how they're like my unofficial survey, temperature taking that I'm
Test group.
taking. I just work it in, they don't know. It's like,
Yeah.
but I mean, it doesn't really matter what class I'm teaching. In every class, they're going to get something along the
Yeah.
lines of what me trying to get a feel about what history they know, what reading they've done,
Yes.
etc. And that's what I could tell.
Okay.
So whenever I would ask them to tell me, the things they were reading
Right.
around that particular time, they would, the one I was getting more repeatedly than anybody else was Zane.
Oh,
And
yes.
yes.
Yep.
So I was like, well, I mean, Zane's fine to read.
It's
I'm
good. I mean, not to say anything bad about Zane.
not saying anything bad about her. Lovely lady.
Right.
I've met her for a couple of times.
Yeah.
But when you're coming in and you're not knowing the history,
Yeah.
and it's
Yep.
like, I wonder if there's some other things
Uh-huh.
that might be
Yep.
able to be out there that you can read
Right.
and get some history stuff.
Yeah.
Not like I hear too many people talking about history in this way, like it's painful or it's spinach or
Yes.
something, and
Yep.
that's not what I was thinking in terms of this. Thinking
Right.
about people who were their age, sort of,
Yes.
and the further back you go, of course, because life expectancy wasn't as long and all of that kind of
Right.
stuff. People in that age group, 18 to, upward, 22 years old, whatever, what they were doing at the historical
Yes.
times they lived in. So that was my thought, like to say, what if they could know more about what Black women that in that age group were
Right.
doing in order to to what they're doing in their
Yes.
lives, the kinds of work that they would be
Right.
doing,
Yeah.
as well as the educational opportunities. Now, one of the things that I also got, because I didn't attend an HBCU,
I didn't
but
either.
yeah, and I didn't know until I taught at Spelman
Yeah.
that, the whole notion of the history of the school being so important.
Oh, yes.
At Spelman, every April 11th, they cancel class, or for the date close to
Okay.
April 11th or whatever, they cancel class or whatever,
Mhm.
and the first years and the seniors all are expected to go to special convocation that commemorates
Okay.
the founding of Spelman College.
Wow. Okay.
So they know the
They know the
history,
history.
how it was founded, how it came to be, whatever.
Right.
They are more in touch with this
Mhm.
whole aspect of Black women in 1881 who didn't have a school
Right.
to go
Yeah.
to.
Right.
And that it was these two white women who came from the north to the south to
Yeah.
establish that.
Mhm.
And how that got established through Friendship Baptist Church. And I was like,
Yes.
okay, that's my thinking. This is pretty amazing.
It
And
is.
so I was like looking around saying, this history of how HBCUs were established from the
Right.
end of the Civil War
Right.
into the beginning of the 19th century, to the beginning of the 20th century, is
Right.
a part of American history that is not
Yeah.
being discussed at
Right.
all. The way
Yes.
in which so much of the establishment of HBCUs was about preparing Black people for
Yes.
certain professions white people didn't want to be in. They didn't
Right.
want to teach Black people. They didn't want to have the Black churches or whatever.
Right.
And
Mhm.
understanding that they needed increasingly a workforce that was going to be at least basically educated enough to work in what was coming, manufacturing, all that
Right.
other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So this is why the HBCUs were started
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
developed over
Yes.
that 35-ish year period where you have a
Right.
large number of them being established.
Yes.
And I said, that's an American story. If I said I can make up my fictitious one, I went and did all this research for other HBCU foundings,
Yeah.
etc., and created Milford
Yeah.
College as this particular place that kind of has
Yes.
little bits and pieces of all of those stories to
Yeah.
make it plausible as a
Right.
fictitious HBCU. But
Yes.
but one that taps into that particular history that we should know more about.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I was thinking. The way that you weave the story together, where we're not just discussing, Reconstruction or coming out of slavery. We're actually talking about somebody's life. What was their day to day like?
Yeah.
What was it like
Mhm.
for a woman to get an education and then work where? live where?
Right.
What about the
Right.
community she was a part of?
Yes.
How are these people becoming educated coming out of that institution, and how important it was for them to have that school?
Yep.
These just stories we weren't hearing about at all.
At
We just
all.
weren't.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't there. And so to be able to connect, like I said, even though they're fictional characters, but it was so plausible and so real. That's like, you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if there was some woman who had a life just like Amanda Stewart. You know, I could see it happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
plausible
Mm-hmm.
is that?
Yeah.
And
And
so,
the whole aspect of their, what the path that they were taking,
yeah,
that, like I said, when I look at the history in terms of thinking about it or whatever, we hear so much, like you're saying, about Reconstruction.
yeah,
And it gets skipped over a lot
it
in
does.
terms of historical discussions. There's a
Right,
lot of people talk about from Civil War to Civil Rights, 100 years
right.
between 1865-ish and
Yes,
1965-ish gets skipped over in terms
it
of a
gets skipped
lot
over a
of
lot.
this other stuff. And part of it, in terms of that, I even as a little kid, hearing things that I understood was it was because that first part of Reconstruction was actually not going that badly.
Right.
Things were actually going
Yeah.
pretty
It was
well.
going pretty well.
Right?
Yeah.
So we had this bad taste in our mouth about
Uh-huh.
Reconstruction because we're looking at it from what the end result of it was.
Right.
But if you broke it down, things
Mhm.
were beginning to happen that were
Yes.
actually pretty good in terms of
Yeah.
Black people beginning to do things,
Yep.
and they had to put a stop to it.
Right.
See?
Exactly.
So that was why I said I'm going to put these stories during that first beginning parts of
Okay.
Reconstruction so that
Yeah.
people can see what that looked like
Right.
and know and remember the whole
Yeah.
aspect about why Reconstruction comes to an end is for a reason.
Yes. It's for a reason.
But that when it does, rather than thinking somehow, like I said, this, and of course, a large part of this is that we have to remember who's writing these histories.
Who's writing the history books? Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So that also goes into what we get and what we
Yeah.
don't get in terms of
Right.
the stories. But
Right.
that what was the response of people when they shut that whole Reconstruction thing down?
Yeah.
My
Right.
belief is that they went to education.
Yes.
That's where they placed a lot of energy, effort through the Black
Yes.
church, all of
Right.
that, these institutions
Yeah.
were that they invested in themselves in the future,
Yes.
the
Yes.
ways that they could through education. And
Right.
like I said, and that's the story that
Hmm.
doesn't get told as often enough in
Right.
terms of, the
I
way things
agree.
are. And I don't, like I said, a large part of it is that we have to think and keep in mind who's telling the stories,
Exactly.
which I think has a lot
Whoever
more to do with it.
whoever controls the narrative controls what we know.
That part. Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they control the publishing houses and they produce the materials that we're learning in
Yep.
school, that's why we don't get the whole story. That's just what it is.
And this is one of the reasons why the Home to Milford College series is an independently published series.
Yeah.
I could not sell it to a traditional publishing house
That is interesting, but
in any way.
I understand it.
I just said for the longest time, even in terms of getting an agent, I was agent poison.
Wow.
Nobody wanted to look at me. Nobody wanted to talk to me about this history.
Gosh.
I had an agent I was pitching to one time. She had the cards in her hand. She was giving out to everybody. I started talking to her. She took the cards and put them in her purse and moved sideways like a crab away from me.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't get anybody. I couldn't get anybody.
That is awful.
Yeah.
That is awful.
Yeah.
And this is a
And
story that
it's
needs to be
because
told.
people are not trying to hear, or we're not, thinking that this would be anything that people would hear. And a large part, like I said, a large part of this narrative, and it's so funny because when I started independently publishing the books, it was like only like the next year or the year after that, the Time magazine put on their cover this stuff about the history wars.
Okay.
And I said, well, yeah, now you
Yeah.
understand
Uh-huh. Right.
what it
Right.
is. Like
Yeah.
people not, wanting to
Yep.
hear this particular narrative or whatever. And even with us, it's still so deeply ingrained because the thought is that our historical knowledge somehow is fixed, that
Yeah.
it's immutable, that it doesn't
Right.
change.
Right.
And trying to get people to see that, yeah, it does change
Yeah.
depending upon who's looking at it.
Exactly.
It
Yeah.
depends on who's telling
Right.
the story.
Right.
And that
Yes.
when we have an opportunity to speak or we have an opportunity to look at the records to see what
Mm-hmm.
the ancestors were saying and doing,
Yes.
there's a
Yes.
different history there
Yes.
that gets
Absolutely.
revealed to us, that is
Yeah.
told. And so often, part of what I say is, and you probably hear people tossing this all around about, I don't want to hear any more stories about slavery, I don't want to hear any more
Oh
stories
yeah.
about
I've heard
this,
that a lot.
all this other kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Like, let's stop looking at what they did to us
Right.
and look instead at what we did to survive that.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
the point in terms of it. But it's
Absolutely.
very, very, very deeply ingrained.
It is. It's one of those things where there's been such a campaign for so many years for us to look at slavery a certain way and for us to feel about it a certain way, so that when you have authors, when you have filmmakers saying, I want to tell this story, immediately it's like, no, I don't want
Mm-hmm,
to hear that again. No, I
mm-hmm,
don't want to see that again.
mm-hmm,
And it's
mm-hmm.
unfortunate because we are missing out on our people with our own voices. We're giving ourselves a voice to tell parts of our story that people have never heard
Yeah.
before. That's why I think this is so important. One of the reasons why I definitely wanted to have you on, because I see that as a gap, that as something that's
Yeah.
missing in the storytelling, in the
Yeah.
landscape of storytelling. We're missing parts of our history that we don't know, that we have a certain perspective of, that's not rooted in truth because it's not coming
Right.
from us.
Right.
We're getting
Right.
this from
Right.
somebody
Right.
else on
Right.
the other side of
Right.
it, right?
Right.
So when I look at a Home to Milford College series and why I felt it was one of the best I'd ever read, it was partially because of the time period that you chose, for
Mm-hmm.
sure, because the lack of stories that have ever been told about that particular time period.
Yeah.
And because what I think you did very well with that story was we didn't just see one perspective. It wasn't just Amanda that we were hearing from,
Right.
because you can have people, they'll say, oh, she's the northerner that came down, she doesn't know how this works, she's just trying to turn things upside down, and this isn't Ohio. Okay, we also hear from Virgil. We
Mm-hmm.
also we get the community, the voices
Mm-hmm.
from the community. We get the voice of Mrs. Milford. We
Yep.
get that side of the story. She comes in and out, but we're hearing all these different voices and seeing how we were existing and living as a community and what this was doing to everybody, the hopes. And like you said, education, how important education
Right.
was
Right.
to everything. It was pivotal to
Yep.
everything.
And everything.
It's everything. So I think what I hear you saying is you were really intentional
Mm-hmm.
about making sure that you told this story about this particular time period. So I wonder for you, how was it to come up with some of these characters? Were they inspired by anyone in particular, or just allowing your imagination to run? How was that for you?
Yes, I also had a Dominique. Hi, I think Maya too's out there. Hey, yes, I was. Amanda is inspired by two examples of Black women who were teachers at
Okay.
that particular point in time. Who'd known that Harriet Jacobs of
Yes.
Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl fame,
Yes.
as well as her daughter Louisa, when they were when the Civil War came to an end, they moved south to Savannah to
Mm-hmm.
teach. And Louisa was somebody who, because of who her father was, who was the very famously the dude down the road
Right.
from Harriet Jacobs,
Yeah.
that was educated, and she taught in Savannah, and then later moved back north and northward at least, and
Yes.
taught at Howard, the early iterations of Howard University when it got
Yes.
started. So you have that connection there.
Okay.
And then Mary Peck, I believe her last name was someone who taught at Hampton. If you've
Okay.
ever visited Hampton,
Yes.
what they have there at the edge of the campus, the Emancipation Tree,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's sad to think about because when I visited Hampton, it was several years back.
Okay.
Um, they had to build that highway,
Yeah.
of course, cutting right through
Yeah.
black neighborhood
Of
where the
course.
HBCU was
Right.
located.
Yeah.
And, they tried to make this attempt to save the Emancipation Tree by building this fence around it. But it's like it's practically right next to the
Yeah.
highway. So this
Right.
tree is getting all of the exhaust and
Yes.
it's so maddening to see it,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
historically speaking, this was the tree apparently where the Emancipation Proclamation was read, which is why they
Right.
call it that. But it's also the tree where Mary Peck and others had taught students
Right.
to read and write
Yeah.
there. It's a
This is a
sacred
historical
space for
site.
that. Yeah, it's a historical site. It's a
Yeah.
sacred space for that reason, and it's not
Yes.
been treated that way because, of
Right.
course, they had to have the highway go through
Just
there,
had to
right?
do it. Right. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, her example in terms
Okay.
of somebody who was teaching the enslaved to read and write
Yeah.
before the end of the Civil War even came
Okay.
there
Okay.
was another inspiration for her.
Okay.
And Virgil's inspirations came from men who were in the Georgia House and the Georgia Senate. I
Okay.
always envisioned him as somebody who was this particular person who was a leader, and then
Yeah.
creating his character around the examples of
Okay.
those who did populate, as
Okay.
in the mayor's mission and the representatives' revolt,
Right.
did populate the Georgia House and Senate. Tunis
Mm-hmm.
Campbell,
Yeah.
and yeah, so yeah, Henry
Okay.
Turner, as others. So yeah,
Yeah.
there were like real life people who were kind of like
Okay.
skeletons of their
Okay.
circumstance and situation. But
Got it.
yeah, the whole thing about having them clash and fall in love or whatever, that was me.
Right.
So
Okay. All right. Because the love story was a very good love story throughout that series.
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Love is at the
Mhm.
core. Love is definitely at the core of this series for sure. You got
They are they are, as I said, intended historical romances,
yeah.
and part of that, like I said, had to do with what the clashes that were involved in terms in
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, Amanda coming in as a northerner, as somebody
Yeah.
who's coming from Ohio who has not been in this southern circumstance and situation before,
Right.
trying to accommodate, get along, or whatever. And I always thought and knew it would take her more than one book
Oh yeah.
to be able to get to a place where she could
Uh-huh.
accommodate,
Yeah. It was different for her.
Yeah.
That was a
Yeah.
huge adjustment
Huge
for
adjustment.
her. Very much. I mean, it was an adjustment for Virgil for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
have that type of
Definitely.
woman. He had never
Definitely.
seen that type of woman
Never seen.
before.
Yeah.
So that I really enjoyed Virgil's reactions to Amanda. I just
She was
did.
shooketh, as the young people say. Yeah.
Shooketh. Okay. It's like, who is this woman coming in here just talking like that? Like, what is this? I loved that so much. And it just, to me, again, it seems so real and so true And for me, I'll say, and this is not the same, but my parents, my mother is from New York,
Okay.
and my dad is from South Carolina. So when
Okay.
my
Okay.
mother
Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
moved,
Yeah.
it's like those two so different, but the love is there.
Yes.
The love
Yes.
is
Yes.
there.
Yes. Exactly. And I
It's a
think for
different
some
thing,
people who are not aware, there is, everyone thinks about Black people as this one homogenous kind of thing. There
right?
are cultural differences
Very much
amongst
so.
us in
Very
terms of
much
these
so.
things. So,
Yeah, and I think because of my own personal story of having a mom from New York and a father from South Carolina. To me, that story is I really got it
yeah.
because I'm like, yeah. There were times when my daddy's looking at my mama like, you just have no idea. You just think you can just come in here and just say whatever you want the way you want to say it. Like, we don't do that like that down here, But that's the key
Yeah,
is we are not a monolith. There
not
are
at all.
so many
Not at all. And that's
subcultures.
part of that, like, was reinforced me when I did teach at Spelman. I did, teaching at
Yeah.
HBCUs or whatever. You see it more, even more so.
I have heard that, and for me, I attended a PWI, so
Hmm.
I did not get the experience of attending an HBCU, but I had friends who
Right.
did, and so their experiences were so different from mine because I was always told that you see the differences in our people and the HBCU in a
Yeah,
way you would never see it at a
that's true.
PWI.
That's true.
So,
Yeah, that's true.
so I think that, and you can answer this. My thought process was I felt that your background coming from a professor, a teacher on an HBCU campus, that just uniquely positioned you to be able to write these stories just because of where you're coming from, the space that you're working in, the material that you're teaching. Do you think that helped to push you in that direction?
Oh yes, I do definitely.
Okay. Okay.
And even my former well, we call them chairs. Professors call them chairs. We don't say boss, but my former chair,
Yeah.
um, when she picked by her in design for her book club or whatever, and I've been to several of her book clubs or
Yeah.
whatever. I was never hesitated to say, when you hired me
Yeah.
to come on board, it changed the trajectory of my life in terms
Oh,
of
that's
that. Yeah,
amazing.
and I always thanked her for that.
Yeah. That's
Hiring me, like, hey, we needed somebody to teach some composition classes, so thank you too. But it's just the thing.
that's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
but I
really
learned
cool.
I learned a lot, and and continuing to do so. I really feel, and this is one of the things I'm attempting to do or whatever, that
Yeah.
more HBCUs should have this origin story, or to take a closer look
Yeah.
at their origin stories
Yes.
in through this way, in terms of
Mhm.
historical fiction,
Yeah.
in terms of that. So it's something that's been a sort of
Okay.
a project I've been thinking about
Yeah. That
for a lot of
would
times,
be
because
great.
it's always there.
Yeah.
It's always there. And I
Hmm.
think, time, distance, whatever it is,
Yeah.
that people have gotten too far away from it, and
Yes.
that it bears looking at again.
Yeah.
Um, Partly because, and this is my thought, they have something to teach us about
Absolutely.
what we might be going through here in
Yes.
this next period of time. There's some lessons, there are some approaches, there's something there, spirit, resilience,
Oh, yes.
whatever, that we need to go back and take another look at
I
again.
absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
Especially because of the political landscape currently and the things that, whether we like it or not, the reality is we are moving into a situation where we can't say for sure what's going to occur, what
Right.
policies will be enacted that will affect our community
Mm-hmm.
specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, with that, it behooves us to reach back to the past
Yeah.
and see how our ancestors, all of those who came before us, how did they survive it? What
Yes.
did they do?
Absolutely.
What was their
Yeah.
response to it?
Mm-hmm.
we're going to need that
We're going
wisdom.
to need those
We're going to
lessons.
need that.
We're going to
We
need
need
that.
those.
Yeah.
We're going to need lessons.
And
We need the stories.
unfortunately, the inclination has been just the opposite. It's like to shut it all
Yeah.
down. We don't want to
Right.
talk about that. We're
Right.
trying to move on. We're trying to move past that.
Right.
And I don't agree with that.
I don't agree
Yeah.
either.
No.
I don't agree. I don't agree either. My sentiments are we need it now more than ever.
That part.
Because what you don't know, you can repeat.
That part.
The history you don't know, you will repeat those mistakes. You will
That
find
part.
yourself in the same situation
That part.
that we
Yeah.
experienced maybe 40, 50, 60 years ago. It hasn't been that long
Yeah.
for
Not
some of this.
that long at all. Not that
It's
long
not
at
that
all.
long.
No.
Not that long.
Yeah, Dominique
We're actually,
said she would read the series Origin Stories of HBCUs and said, yeah,
I would too.
because my well, I'm teaching in the spring historical fiction writing course.
Oh,
So
wow, great.
yeah, my students will be working on the
That's
origin story of Clark
amazing.
Atlanta.
That is
That is
amazing. And
that's
that,
going to be their term
yes.
long project
That's
in
great.
terms of
And that
be beginning to pull that
particular,
one together. The Washerwomen's War is the one that I published about Spelman College,
okay.
which is a novella that, like I said, always had for me ways of thinking about that the strike. I mean, it was like the labor, the whole notion of labor and the labor movement in this country. Black women showed the way with that strike.
Yes.
And I never thought, I was like, oh, it's just some pure coincidence that the women went on strike and then Spelman College started down in the basement of Friendship Baptist Church. Like some pure coincidence. It was not a coincidence.
No, it's not.
They informed one another. Absolutely and totally. So that's what that novella did, was to unite that. And sort of provide a plausible sort of explanation as to how that could happen or whatever, with a love story, of course, in terms of that aspect, with that. And like I said, I enjoyed writing that little novella in terms of that. And that was part of me thinking about, and particularly now because I'm teaching historical fiction writing in the spring, something small in pieces that my students could work on and put together and still begin to have an appreciation for the origin story of Clark Atlanta University, pointedly Clark College, in terms of how it got started.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's amazing. I think that's so needed, because when you think about, and I don't know if that's true for everyone, but there's such a rich history as it relates to HBCUs and how they were founded that many of us do not know and have never heard of. There are still a number of HBCUs that some of us are not even aware of. They just aren't. They don't get discussed as much. You have your handful. You always hear about Howard, Spelman, Clark, Morehouse, Hampton. You hear about the same ones, but they all have rich history.
Yes.
And so they all deserve to have the story told. So I think that's just incredible. I wanted to ask, as far as you choosing to do not just historical fiction, but historical romance, for you placing the love story, is that your way of, I guess, giving the reader some form of entertainment to balance out the education? Was that something that you were strategic about, or did you just want to do a love story?
Well, my first thoughts were, in terms of me beginning to think about how I could get published, my thoughts were that it would be easier somehow with romance in terms of that. That would be an entree point into some of the other kinds of historical fiction writing that I wanted to do. But the other aspect of that, though, and I came to this realization pretty quickly, was the notion of, without the love and support that existed at that time, that the educational project, educational piece, was not going to flourish or be possible. So it worked out that it all came together organically. To make the point, like when people say, I just know somebody else had made a comment earlier in terms of people don't want to talk about the history because it's depressing, whatever. People loved each other, have fallen in love with each other, all of this stuff, or else we wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So that to me is like, let's look at the joy and the, of that particular part of the story. Again, rather than focusing on the external circumstances and it's not dismissing those circumstances, it's shifting the focus. I think that needs to be shifted, I think, as part of the whole story.
I totally agree with that. And that's what I loved about it, is that I think what we needed to do is there needed to be a shift in how we perceived a story about a certain time period.
Right.
I think the problem with people saying, like, someone commented about it being depressing and that's why they don't want to see it, is that you've had so many people previously who they focus on the trauma of it, they focus on the tragedy, they focus on the politics of it all, which, yes, that's a part of it. But when you're talking about real people they had love, they had fun, they had joy, there was regular drama still going on, so people were living their full lives out here. Even while this stuff was going on, they were having a full life.
I just like, one of the things that I loved watching, people who follow me know that I love to watch Finding Your Roots.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. So every episode, I used to call it the Plot Bunny Show, because I would be like sitting there writing some notes, about like a certain kind of story I might want to tell down the pike, whatever. So you remember at the end of last season, he had 3 quote unquote regular people, non-celebrities, stories that he told or whatever. And when that show was over, I was like, he should have just called this show Grandma Was a Hoe. Because that was what they all had in common.
They all had it. They all had that same thing. They did.
Because people's DNA coming up, not the way they thought. That show was just Grandma Was a Hoe. That's what she was.
Grandma was in these streets. That's what they found out. Your sweet grandma was in the streets, honey. She was in them streets.
It was messy. And that is, like I said, the kind of things like we can tell that story in terms of, and I don't think Grandma was too depressed about that. I think
she wasn't depressed when she was getting hers. That wasn't depressing for her. But that's the stories we miss.
That's the stories we miss when we look too much at what the focus of what they want us to be looking at.
Exactly.
In terms.
That's why it's so important for us to have our authors telling our
part.
Stories.
Exactly. Yes.
That's why this is so important.
That part. Yep.
That's the part.
Yeah.
And we gotta support it. And that's one of my purposes and my mission for even doing this. Is that I want to give that highlight to our authors who are telling these stories and let people know these books are out there. They may not market it the way they do everything else, but these stories are here.
Yes,
and we need to support it.
Yes.
We need to get out and we need to support it. I do want to ask, before I bring it to a close, I have to ask, I noticed the shift with you doing the book by her own design, American Daughters, where you started focusing on real people. These weren't fictional characters. What made you decide to shift from making up a fictional character to actually highlighting people, actual people?
Well, that was always part of the plan. And if you notice in some in really all of the Milford books, and even in my other series, the Migration to the Heart series, there's always a real person in there. That's was me working that out in the background. I was using the books to work that out, to be able to show if and as it happened, that moment came in terms of anybody who was wanting to publish traditionally or whatever, what I
Right.
could do in terms
Okay.
of writing historically or whatever. That was always part of the plan.
Okay.
Because another thing that I noticed while I was teaching again were it's Spelman, and it's like these young people not knowing the
Right.
contributions
They don't know.
of these great Black
Yeah.
figures, and it's like, how could you know? You're a fashion student, you don't know who Ann Lowe was,
Right. Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And even for me, as you know, when I was pursuing my PhD, as a part of it, part of my journey turned to that was like saying, okay, who did this before?
Yeah.
Who did this
Yeah.
before I did it?
Uh-huh.
And what did they have to go through in
Oh,
terms of
yeah.
this is how I learned about Anna Julia Cooper. I was like, Anna Julia
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
born, enslaved,
Right.
wanting to get her education at
Yes.
St. Augustine or whatever, and then marries, and then I guess
Right.
fortunately for us and for her future education, her husband dies so that she can
Right.
go get her master's.
Yeah.
And that her journey to get a PhD, wanting to go to Columbia
Right.
in New York City to get a PhD, and starts attending classes. And they're like, yeah, we'll take your money to attend classes, but we are never going to
Yeah.
give you a
Right.
PhD. So don't even try that, whatever. And so so she decides instead to go to the Sorbonne in Paris
Mm-hmm.
every summer, because by that point she's teaching and then becomes a principal
Right.
in a secondary school in Washington, D.C. And so every summer she gets on that boat to go to France to do her studies.
Yeah. That's incredible.
And she gets her PhD when she's 65 years old.
Senior citizen. Right.
Doing that. Because Columbia said no.
Right.
All the way back. Because they know she's the fourth Black woman to get a PhD, but she would have unquestionably been the first.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
If Columbia had let her do that, but they said no. So then it's like, okay, well, I'll show you.
Right.
I'll get my PhD from the Sorbonne in Paris, writing the dissertation in French.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible story.
So when I think I'm having a difficult time,
you think about that. It's mind-blowing.
Right?
It really is.
This is the kind of thing our young people don't know more about, because they're not wanting to show these examples.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
And so, so my thought was like, could we have more of that, please? And especially since I noticed publishing more women, mostly white women, but women's stories in this same way, right?
Right.
So that was always from 2010 on. I was like, okay, it's like I'll start up with this historical romance section, and then I'll work my way to what I call 2.0.
Okay.
But because of our current climate, we have been told. Those of us who've been writing the stories have been told no more.
Wow, that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate.
No more of that. And to me, you're shutting that down. Is it because it's not selling enough, or is it because there's been some success? I don't know.
Yeah,
it makes you think. Wonder.
It's like, think about the history. Think about other things that got shut down.
Yeah, exactly. Was it a little too? Was that the problem? Okay.
Right. Makes you think about that. Which is why it's so important for us to keep doing what we can to get those stories told. Yeah. Because there's always a reason why somebody wants to silence you.
That part.
They know our power. They know the power in our story. When we know who we are and the rich history we come from, it is less likely that we can be bamboozled.
Right.
That's just my opinion.
Right. No. I completely agree with that. I completely agree with it. So now my mission or part is to think about, okay, so then what comes next? Yeah. In terms of that,
That makes so much sense.
And you say, people are like, oh no, when she says, pivot, what does that mean? Whatever. I'm always going to find a way.
Got
Because
it.
people notice my lone contemporary romance, Sweet Tea, is a Milford
Yes,
College story.
it is. Yes, it
You
is.
gonna get this Milford College story? I don't care.
I love it. I love that. I love that. I could just tell it's like she's like, oh, you gonna get this whether you want it or not. You gonna get it. One way or the other. You gonna make sure we get it. So
You gonna get this story. You gonna get some Virgil and Amanda up in
you gonna
here.
get it. You gonna get it. And I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, basically on the verge of romance landia, because people in romance novels, they can't never die. It's be like, oh, there's gonna be like some 165-year-old person up in
You're right.
child. Because I went in Mayor's Mission when I killed off Pauline. Folks was mad, honey.
Oh God. I'm gonna tell you. I love you as an author, but I was really mad at you about Pauline.
I'm still hearing about it. I
was
know.
like, did she really have to? You know what? I'm gonna tell you. You were like Shonda Rhimes to me when that happened. I'm telling you. You know how Shonda Rhimes be killing people off on Grey's Anatomy that everybody loves? I'm like, so she just Shonda Rhimes us in this book? Really? I had to put it down. I couldn't believe you did that to me. I was devastated.
Yep. I found out that time, and it's like these people don't want nobody to die. So if I write Sweet Tea set to present day, Virgil and Amanda's going to have to be up in the corner, being 180 and 165 years old.
Prop them up somewhere, because I'm telling you, when you did that to Pauline, I put it down. I was like, I screamed.
People had a hard time. I know.
I did not see that coming.
I heard. I took stripes. I heard. I was like, oh, okay, girl.
You ruffled some feathers when you did that. You did.
Shonda Rhimes. Shoot, I wish I had some of that Shonda Rhimes money. Shoot.
Oh, listen. If you can get that, what? That's what we all want. We want that.
I know that's right, honey.
But I mean, even now, of course, you broke my heart about Pauline, but the baby Lawrence, that when they lost the baby,
it wasn't penicillin, man. It's like it wasn't. Yeah. And that was that was like one of the stories that was like what I think people have this like overwhelming impression like, oh, when they lose a baby or whatever, it's not that big of a deal. Yes, it was.
Right.
Yes, it was that big of a deal.
Yes,
but that was poor little Lawrence had to be sacrificed.
Oh my gosh. I was like, Shonda Rhimes, boy, she hit you, you don't know who getting ready to go.
On the Mayor's Mission, dang, I went double, man. I should have just like spread it out a little bit. Dang.
Like, oh my gosh, it's heartbreak. But I did appreciate it because that unique situation of, like we said, Amanda comes from the North. She didn't grow up in slavery. She was free.
Right.
So she doesn't understand what it was like for them as women, having babies, getting married, having to go back and work, that sort of thing. Yeah. And I think for her, that sadness of just being in that place, her husband's off, and of course she was proud of him. Right. But I think just where they were in their relationship and where they were as far as what was going on with the school and what's going on with him, she had so much weighing on her. And I was scared at the point that I was reading it, because I was like, oh gosh, she's not going to be able to recover from this. Like, this is going to be hard. Because again, I've heard so many times about women from that time period. It's like, you just drop the baby and keep going. If it makes it, don't. You just keep going. I never thought that was realistic. I never really believed that as a mother myself. I just don't believe it. So I think it's you writing it the way that you did, even though it was heartbreaking, of course. But again, that layer of humanity and giving that voice to someone's pain in a situation that, I mean, all women can relate to losing a baby that's ever had a miscarriage or,
Yeah.
stillbirth or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. So it's
Mm-hmm.
that's a human experience.
Yeah.
That's not just about this formerly enslaved community. This was a story about life.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
I love that
Absolutely.
you created that piece where we're not even thinking about the political landscape anymore. We're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about how is Amanda
Right.
gonna
Right.
recover
Right.
from
Exactly.
this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's missing, from our stories, because, I think for a lot of people, they don't want to revisit anything painful or hurtful about
Yeah.
their time period, but the humanity, we got to think about it. Just like they fell in love and there was joy and laughter, there were losses too
Yeah. There
that
were
they
losses
had to grapple
too.
with.
And like
Yeah.
I said, we are going to have to learn and lean upon this wisdom.
Yes.
That is my
Absolutely.
thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
That wisdom is going to
Considering
be very important,
Yeah,
forthcoming.
considering where things are going, we're gonna have to know, because a lot of us, we've been so privileged to be in
Yeah.
the part of history that we've
Mm-hmm.
been in. We lived in,
Ask
some of
me
us
all
have been
time,
very.
what time would you try? Would you time travel to? I don't time travel to nowhere. I know too much. No,
No,
I'm
we
not
ain't traveling.
getting in no little time travel. Nothing.
No,
No,
no, no. I'm good right here. I'm good right here.
it's terrible as it is. I'm good right here.
As
Yeah.
bad as this
Yes.
is, I picked this.
Mm-hmm.
I picked this. You just
Please.
gotta know. But again, and that's why these stories, these books are important, because there are so many of us who don't know
So
about the
many.
history
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
don't
Mm-hmm.
probably wouldn't research on their own to find the information.
Yeah.
So if there is a fictional book, sometimes that's the only way we can get to people,
Yep.
is through a book.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yep.
is why another reason why I wanted to have you on, because I wanted anyone who was watching to understand that, yes, this will entertain you. Yes, there'll be laughs, there'll be cries and all of that, but you're going to learn something that
Mm-hmm.
you would not have otherwise known before,
Yeah.
in hopes that you will do your own research after reading it
That's the
to find
point.
out more.
Yep. That's the
Yeah,
point. Yep. That's the
that's the
point of
point.
historical fiction. That's the cool thing about it. Exactly.
Absolutely. That's what I love. So
Mhm.
before we close, what do you have coming up? Is there anything we could be looking forward to from you in the new year?
Yeah, that's the question. 2025 is looking like,
2025.
yeah. Well, one of the things that I have been approached about along these lines is for American Daughters, which features the unknown interracial friendship between the daughters of
Yes.
Theodore Roosevelt and Booker T.
Right.
Washington, was to write that as a children's book. So,
Oh,
yeah, that is one
nice.
project that is upcoming
Oh,
in terms of that.
nice.
And then another thing I've been thinking about is in terms of a contemporary series
Okay.
set in Milford as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, more of the
Oh,
contemporary, because I said the whole trajectory of Milford College is laid out in my mind. I know like
okay.
exactly who descends from who and
Okay.
all of that in
All
terms of
right.
that. That's all there in terms
Yeah.
of that story. And so yeah, Milford as the HBCU in
Uh-huh.
present day and the struggles in
Okay.
terms of what that means is still a very engaging story.
It
And
is.
the people who play roles in that and parts in that and who,
Yeah.
that's all that is all fodder for more
Okay.
stories. So,
Oh, great.
yeah,
So we can see more coming out of Milford
yes,
College.
yes,
That is,
hmm
oh, that's very
hmm
exciting. I'm looking
hmm
forward to that.
yes, yes.
So we have a children's book, and we also have some more coming out of Milford College. That is amazing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
And if that happens on the traditional side or whatever, then maybe I'll go back and do the historical
Okay.
stuff myself. In
Okay.
terms of
All
that,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Because
great.
March's story is very, very compelling, and I've had it in my mind for a very,
Yeah.
very long time about what happens to her when she grows up. and gets
Okay.
married and all of that. So,
Yeah, that's amazing because I did wonder myself when I finished the series. I thought about what's going to happen to March. What's she going to do? What's her life going to turn out to be?
Yep,
Oh,
yep, yep.
yes.
It's quite a
That
story.
that is exciting. Well, that means we have a lot to look forward to. So that's great. I'm happy. I'm happy, and I would love to talk to you again whenever those things drop. I
Okay,
would
we'll
really
do.
love to talk to you
We'll
again.
do. I would
Absolutely.
look forward to that.
Thank you so much. I
Yes.
appreciate your time for coming on tonight. This has been a great conversation. Um, I love, like I said, I'm a historical fiction lover. So this is right up my alley. But I wanted to share it with the world. I wanted anybody watching me. I want them to get excited too.
Yeah.
And maybe if it wasn't your genre of choice, give it a try. You will learn something and you will be entertained at the same time. So there's balance there. There's balance
Yes.
there.
Yes. Yes. Well,
Yes.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much
Thank
for having me
you.
on.
Of course. I look forward to speaking to you sometime in the
Yes.
future.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, thank
Have a good
you.
evening.
All right. Happy holidays.
Same to you. Bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye.